So, Outbreak mode has been out in Rainbow Six for a couple of weeks now. I doubt it's something that anybody predicted coming to the game, given that it's a huge change of setting. I'm just going to get it out of the way right now and say that I personally feel like adding a zombie mode is kind of a form of creative bankruptcy at this point. So many games have done this, so many movies have covered this exact thing, and it just feels like beating a dead horse in 2018. If there had to be a new PvE element to the game, I would have preferred an overhaul of Terrorist Hunt mode. That's something that already exists in the game. Maybe add more variety to the enemies, and perhaps they could have done these kind of little mission maps as they've done with this mode. But I understand that having an alien zombie threat, it does provide variety and creativity that you otherwise wouldn't get from a realistic game like Rainbow Six. Which is probably the whole reason that this thing came about in Call of Duty about a decade ago to begin with. So even though I think that this mode really exists just to follow a trend in shooters, a trend that feels fairly dated to me, that doesn't mean that I dislike the mode at all. So let's take a closer look at everything that it had to offer. The thing that surprised me the most about Outbreak was that the level of presentation was way higher than I expected. Ubisoft spent some real money on these cutscenes that you can watch before you play, and they look about as good as any trailer for any of their other games. The plot of Outbreak is that a Soviet space capsule crashed in the Nevada desert, causing an alien virus that turns people into zombies and other creatures to spread throughout the area. Team Rainbow was called in to deal with this for some reason, and they've been given 3 objectives that correspond to each game map. Those maps, by the way, look pretty good. The art design is obviously a lot crazier than anything else you're going to see in the game, and I especially like how the virus has sort of turned the land into a alien hellscape. The enemy designs look okay. I think they could have turned out more generic, but there's really only so many ways to design a zombie-type enemy in the first place. The crawling, explodey guys remind me of enemies from a bunch of other shooters, and the Smasher looks almost exactly like the Pride Demon from Dragon Age, at least to me. The sound design in this mode is pretty good, and I appreciate that all of the playable operators got new voice lines, which is something I genuinely didn't expect to happen. The characters who all appear in trailers also seem consistent with how they've been described in the operator bios. Siege doesn't exactly have a colorful cast of characters, and arguably it's not meant to, but it is nice to see some of them in more detail and acting how you would expect, even in the face of a zombie apocalypse. So, let's cover the basics of the mode itself. Each Outbreak stage can be played by 3 players, with a mix of attackers and defenders working together. The selectable operators include Smoke, Ash, Doc, Glaz, Kapkan, Tuchanka, Buck, Ying, and the 2 new characters, Lion and Finka. There is also an option for the Recruit, who has a brand new character model this time, and a plethora of options to choose from. Something that became apparent pretty quickly on is that gadgets generally aren't as important this time around, since just putting as many bullets as you can into the enemy horde is more important. So the Recruit is actually a pretty viable option, since he has extra equipment options instead of a gadget. Unsurprisingly, Lion and Finka are both extremely useful in this mode. Lion in particular, his scanner can detect enemies even when they're standing still, which it can't do in the real game. Generally, you can mix and match all of the characters here for some decent results, but I feel like Kapkan and Tuchanka are really only useful in very specific sequences, and most people are definitely going to want to run Doc or Finka just to get some healing going. Each stage in the game consists of the team having to make their way through an area to get to a location, and then having to defend something in that area for a certain amount of time before they can advance. During these defensive segments, you can use barricades and reinforcements to protect your position. 2 stages involve defending explosive charges with time limits. These explosives have health bars, and when they're depleted, it doesn't cause the mission to end. You just have to put another charge in place, and the timer stays where it was. Which is nice because I can see that getting really aggravating for people if it worked differently. Generally, the only way to fail the mission is if all 3 operators die, or if the VIP dies. There are 3 stages in Outbreak that I believe are meant to correspond to 3 different difficulty levels, but it's not actually possible to choose the stage you want. You just have to join and hope you get a certain level. The stage that I found to be the easiest was the Veterans Hospital, where the team has to head inside and locate a doctor who needs to be protected for the rest of the level, while heading around and looking for different components of a possible vaccine before moving to the helipad and waiting for evac. The defensive positions in the stage are generally easy to hold, and because most of it is indoors, there's not a whole lot of destruction elements at play. Not to mention that the tougher enemies are a bit easier to deal with in tight spaces. The next stage contains a mixture of indoor and outdoor environments. The first objective is to plant charges inside of a resort where the aliens are breeding, and the second half revolves around rescuing Jaeger after his helicopter crashes somewhere. I did notice on repeat playthroughs that there is some variance in where the charges have to be planted in the resort, but besides that, there's really not that much to say about this level. I found it to be the most uninteresting, despite providing a good challenge. The final stage involves traversing a trailer park and a junkyard in order to find the space capsule that's responsible for the outbreak. This stage has some pretty large outdoor environments and contains multiple defense sections, both indoors and outdoors. I found it to be easily the hardest of the bunch, as it culminates in a situation where you have to defend 3 points at once, although only one of them needs to survive. There's not a whole lot to talk about in regards to the level design, other than that if the Siege developers ever wanted to make some kind of full-length campaign, this is definitely a pretty good foundation. There is something to this formula, but I don't expect them to do that anytime soon. But a zombie mode is really only as interesting as its zombies, and while I haven't played Call of Duty Zombies or Left 4 Dead in a long time, and I might not be able to give you a good point of comparison, I think that they generally did an okay job. But just an okay job. Almost all of these enemies fall into the general tropes that you would expect from this kind of game. Grunts are the basic zombies. They run at you and try to smack you, and sometimes they just kind of stand around awkwardly when they don't know you're there. Breachers are the glowing guys who crawl around and are capable of exploding either by choice or if you hit the glowing area on their back. The only real mix-up with these guys is that they can use their explosive power to destroy reinforced barricades, which is a nice touch. The remaining 3 enemies are less common. They generally only appear during scripted segments, although sometimes I felt like the game would swap one out for the other on repeated playthroughs, although I could be wrong about this. There's the Rooter, which is capable of teleporting like a whack-a-mole zombie that can trap you in place if you walk within its area of effect ability. Easily the most annoying enemy to kill due to its speed and the fact that it has a surprising amount of health. There's the Smasher, which is a giant armored creature capable of smacking and charging at you. Its attacks do a lot of health and tend to knock you around and stun you. There are a couple of moves where the hitbox feels completely inconsistent, sometimes even hitting me while I'm directly behind the creature. The most effective way to take these guys out is to get them to charge into objects, which will stun them, and then run behind and do a quick time knife attack 3 times. This can make them very tedious to fight, especially during defense sections, and I really wish that there was an easier way to kill them, or that the weak point knife attack was enough to do the job. The last enemy is my favorite. It's called the Apex. It basically looks like a big scary wizard floating around and throwing balls of energy at you. It doesn't really pose much of a direct threat outside of the fact that its attacks can obscure your vision, but it is capable of spawning in new enemies until you kill it. This can be a bit tedious because the Apex has a lot of health and it doesn't really seem to slow down its spawn rate. I sort of wish that it just made existing enemies faster or stronger instead of constantly spawning new ones, but I do think it functions as a nice boss monster of sorts. And that's really the gist of the mode. Not the most complicated thing, but I think it serves as a good sideshow to the main game. If you've been playing some matches and you want to do something a little different, it's a good distraction. The problem is that we already have something like this in the form of Terrorist Hunt, and at least Terrorist Hunt feels like you're kind of playing the same game. But of course, Outbreak does have its own share of rewards to be earned by playing the mode. Most of these rewards are earned through the Ubisoft Club weekly challenges that they've been putting players through, with new weapon charms usually. though there has been some controversy surrounding the Outbreak packs that were added as well. Ubisoft has created 50 items ranging from a premium skin of Ash to palette swaps for a lot of characters, gas mask style helmets, and a few weapon skins and charms. These can only be earned through the new Outbreak packs, and unlike traditional loot boxes, you'll never get a duplicate. Acquire 50 of them, and you'll acquire all 50 items. The problem is that there's no way to acquire these without spending real money. Every player will have some packs just to start, and the exact amount depends on what version of the game you purchased, and if you have the Year 3 pass, you should have enough rainbow coins to buy at least 4. But besides that, I don't even think I have to do any number crunching to tell you that it's probably not worth spending money to get all 50 of these items. Now, some people did get mad about this when it was first announced, and Ubisoft did make some adjustments. Everybody who logged into the game about a month before Outbreak started was given a palette-swapped version of the premium Ash skin. But that doesn't change the fact that Ubisoft wants us to spend a pretty hefty chunk of change to get this stuff. And I don't see why the current system that's already in place for alpha packs couldn't at least have been applied to Outbreak. But at the same time, I can't get too worked up about this for one simple reason. Most of the cosmetics found in Outbreak packs don't look good. I realize this is my opinion, but I see absolutely no reason why I should be getting stoked about wearing my gross bright yellow palette swap around the battlefield. Even the gas masks look kinda lame, and I'm a guy who really likes gas masks. Not in that way, but you know what I mean, hopefully. I have to wonder if the art team got all of these items ready, and then someone else in the production decided that they could only be distributed at a real money cost. Because these items, they don't really seem to be all that legendary to me, especially when you consider that the one item that does hold that spot was given out for free anyways. I imagine the situation is frustrating for people who have a deep need to get absolutely everything, but that's not exactly a good use of your time, let alone your money. I do hope that any future events like this have a better reward system, but that leads into the ultimate question. Should something like this ever happen again for Rainbow Six Siege? Hopefully, by the time this video goes live, Outbreak will still be available to play. Limited time modes seem to be a popular thing these days, thanks to games like Overwatch. But I don't think I'm alone in saying that a lot more work went into Outbreak than any Overwatch event. I mean, the patch for the season was at least 10 gigabytes. Files that are just going to be sitting on my PlayStation hard drive, forever locked away. I don't know anyone who likes this temporary business model that's been going around lately. The only real argument that I can think of as to why Outbreak should go away is that it's extremely jarring compared to the rest of the game. But Call of Duty has never had that problem. Part of me hopes that Outbreak will return sooner than later, perhaps during Season 3 when no new map is scheduled to be released, but I'm not expecting that. Overall, Outbreak really just seems to be a flash-in-the-pan event that serves to make the season less distinct than what's come before. I don't doubt that Lion and Finka aren't significant new operators, and I'm glad that some form of permanent content was added at the same time as the Outbreak mode. But it's only going to be a matter of time before the new season is announced, and we'll all likely already forget about our time with Outbreak, instead getting wrapped up in speculation about the new operators and map, things that we'll be able to play with forever. Thank you for watching. I never really intended to do this much content on Rainbow Six, but it's a game that I play a lot, so I might as well get something else out of it. I definitely want to mix it up going forward, and if you're curious about future content, go ahead and subscribe. Hit the bell. I don't know what the bell does, but everyone says to hit the bell. Maybe give this video a like or share it with somebody who doesn't play Rainbow Six so they can see what this mode looked like while it was playable. I don't know. Did you spend money on Outbreak packs? If you regret it, type it in the comments. Do all of the YouTube things. Go to my Twitter. I hate Twitter, but I have an account. Is there anything else to say? I think I'm just rambling. Maybe I should have written this down.